Yes, hello and welcome everybody. It's Chris here from the Ministry of Dice, and I'm back again today with another one of my OP kit retrospectives. And the sharper viewers will notice that there's something a little bit different going on today. Yeah, just they don't know this, but you guys are down below me there like that. Should we do a Brady? Daniel, do a Brady Bunch. You look up. So, folks, I've reached the point in the chronological order of the OP kits where I'm at the Dungeons and Dragons set. It's no secret that the comic book stuff is my jam. That's where I'm at. I don't have a great deal of behind the scenes knowledge, lore understanding of the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. So I've been out and about recruiting. I'd like you all to say hello to Daniel and Craig from the Ready Set Roll podcast, my Dungeons and Dragons experts today. Hello, gents.
Hello.
Hey.
So, for anybody who's not familiar with you guys, do you want to take just a moment to share with my viewers what the Ready Set Roll podcast is all about and what you do?
Dan, do you want me to start or you want to go?
You go ahead and start.
So, Ready Set Roll is a actual play 5e, which we'll go into depth about what that means later on. Podcast. So basically, we play the game and we record it for you guys to enjoy. Our like little stick, I guess, would be our last gaming session or campaign. We did it in outer space. Most D&D, if you look at the cards that we look at now, it's medieval themed. You have dragons, you have drow, you have tree ants, like Middle Earth type stuff. But with Ready, Set, Roll, we decided, screw all that. We're going to have aliens, and we're going to have dragon aliens, and we're going to have tree ant aliens. But yeah, that's where we went. And each 15th on the month, we have a cool show that we do that's similar to this, where we deep dive into what D&D means to each and every person, where Daniel is the host, and it's Ready, Set, Roll Insight. Dan, you want to give us a little show about what that's about?
Yeah, I do. Basically, Ready, Set, Roll Insight is where I do interviews with people from other podcasts, people from our podcast, discussing a topic on D&D, and then giving a piece of insight to people who are listening that they can take forward into their own games. It could be as simple as, wow, I'm already freezing up. It could be as simple as not everything has to be set in the guidelines of D&D. Like, you can be creative with how you make monsters, or be creative with how you can play the game. Like with the spaceship setting we do, where basically we change the name. Craig changed the names of some monsters and put them into a new format of what they do. And it was pretty cool. Kept me on my feet because I have a lot of knowledge on the monster manual, and it kept me guessing what kind of monsters we were fighting. So it was pretty cool.
Excellent. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, gents. Well, there you go. There's the credentials. The credentials, well established. So just as a counterpoint to that, I know D&D from the Dice Masters cards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Oh, I watched a really crappy movie with Jeremy Irons in once.
Yeah. It doesn't give you a good view of what D&D can be.
Should watch the Tom Hanks one.
The Tom Hanks one? I've not seen that.
It's about how Tom Hanks is a character who is playing Dungeons and Dragons, and he's slowly going mad. It was during the time, like in the 80s, where Dungeons and Dragons was thought to be satanic rituals and stuff.
Nice. What's it called? Yeah. I can add it to my AMD watch list right now.
I gotta look up the title.
If I go through Tom Hanks's,
I am
literally typing a reminder right now, Daniel.
Mazes and Monsters. That's what it was. 1982.
Mazes and Monsters.
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you what else I know is I'm a big fan of Community, and they did a D&D episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of people have learned Community from, or learned D&D from Community.
Sure. Well, Dan Harmon's a big D&D fan, isn't he? Yeah.
Yes, he is. He also has a online show where he plays D&D.
Yeah. Does he play with Joe Manganiello?
No, I haven't seen him play with Joe Manganiello.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either.
Okay, I think Joe Manganiello.
Not to say that he hasn't done it. I mean, there's just so much. It's blowing up right now. D&D is blowing up.
A lot of stars came out of nowhere saying, I'm into D&D. And I was like,
Yeah.
Vin Diesel?
Superman, what's his name? From over my side.
Henry Cavill.
Cavill, yeah.
Cavill.
He's a big D&D guy. Mm-hmm. And I think Dax and, what's the name? Anna from Frozen are D&D folks as well. And of course, Will Wheaton.
Yeah.
From Tabletop, yeah. And the Geek and Sundry crowd. See, so maybe I do know a bit more than I let on.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to hop off the call. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. It's going to chew the fat, yeah. Well, thank you, gents, for coming along and helping me out with this. We'll crack on. So we've had a chat just before we started, but the viewers will know that the idea with the OP kit retrospectives is to take a look at those OP kits and try and understand them through the lens of the source material. Mm-hmm. And for the D&D Battle for Faerun, there were 3 sets, and we're going to take a look at those. So if you're ready, gents, mm-hmm. we'll get stuck in with the first set. So I'll just pop that on camera for the viewers. And the first set is made up of the Drow Assassin, the Elf Wizard, and the Dwarf Cleric. Actually, maybe I'll ask a question just very quickly, because something I've always wondered. Mm-hmm. The Elf Wizard's subtitle reminded me of it. So the Elf Wizard is called Legendary Harper. And in the D&D Dice Masters expansions, a lot of the identifiers follow this pattern of, so Legendary Beast or, Minion. They take there's these patterns that kind of go through, or like the human paladin is a Zentarim. There's these kind of identifying tags. So maybe you can explain that. So Order of the Gauntlet's another one, yeah.
Okay, I can weigh in on this. There are different guilds in the world of D&D, or I think it's called Faerun is their world that they've set up. And one of the guilds is the Order of the Gauntlet and the Harpers. So that's where that would come in.
Yeah, okay. So have I been mispronouncing it all this time then? It's not Faerun.
Faerun, yeah. I was going off the top of my head. Don't listen to me, guys. I'm just the expert here.
I have been saying it correct. I've heard it also like Faerun, Faerun, Faerun.
Dialect definitely plays a distinct way of saying it,
Yeah, is there like an elf language specialist or something in Wizards of the Coast too?
Let's dig up Tolkien and we'll ask him.
Yeah, is he the source material?
Craig, you.
So, if you want to, I can give you a little bit of background on D and where it starts.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's hop in our DeLorean and go back to the time of 1973, where a young Gary Gygax and Dave Arnson are vigorously working on their first drafts of Dungeons & Dragons. But first, we need to go even farther back. In the mid-1960s, all the craze was tabletop, like battle simulators. But screw Risk. We're not talking about Risk. We're talking about hardcore battle sims. Our boy, Gary Gygax, is into a little thing called Gettysburg. It's a game where you control like whole armies on the battlefield. And then along comes this guy named Dave Wesley, and he makes this game called Braunstein. And the thing that made Braunstein so unique was you didn't control an army, you controlled like one person in the army. And that like blew the top off of everything. Like everybody was like, oh, so this makes this more personal. My guy is like a spy in the German army or whatever, and just different stuff like that people could actually connect to these characters and not just the soldiers on the battlefield. But anyway, so in 1968, our hero in the story, Gygax, he's like, we need a place for all us nerds to get together and play these awesome war games and discuss how we can make them better. So you might be asking yourself, how and where did they meet? Well, Gygax creates a little known thing called Gen Con. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but yeah, he comes up with that.
Oh, I heard it mentioned in passing.
At Gen Con, all the top minds in the world converge, and we're able to talk about how to solve the world's top problems. Like, how do we make these games more fun?
How to develop a better war game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, jump ahead to 1971. I know I'm giving a little bit of background to this because if you don't give the background to where it all started, it makes more sense this way.
Sure.
Gygax and fellow Gen Conner Jeff Perrin publish a new set of game rules called Chainmail. With Chainmail, it's basically set in medieval times with the whole, idea of I get to control this one knight in this army type of deal. With Chainmail, writers like Dave Arneson were able to come up with cool storylines, like one specifically called Blackmoor. And that's where medieval heroes could slay monsters in dungeons for glory and treasure. Now, Gygax gets his hands on Blackmoor about a year later, and he's like, this guy right here gets it. So, we're going to come back to where we started. Back in 1973, two gaunt, pale creatures wince at the sun as they come above ground, clutching on tight to their prize. No, I'm not talking about Smeagol or Golem. I'm talking about Gygax and Arneson. They have the first issue of Dungeons and Dragons, and guess what, baby? It's a hit and sells out everywhere.
Yep.
To upset conservative mothers across the nation.
Well, their first run was like, 10,000 editions, and they all sold out?
They sold out, and then they did another printing of about 2,000 like a year later, and it sold out immediately too. It was just selling like hotcakes.
Sure.
So people are eating up D&D. The boys start to put out expansions like Greyhawk. The expansions not only added more story, but they added classes like the Thief, Monk, Paladin, and Assassin. Some of the ones that we're talking about today. Sure. Constantly evolving with new classes, stories, and rules. Guess what, guys? It's time for a reset. In 1989, second edition is released, and it's not long after. Ravenloft is a D&D setting, and it's one of D&D's most boss settings, and has the most infamous villain, Strahd von Zarovich, is born.
Oh, Strahd, he's a card.
Is he now?
Yeah, he's a vampire dude.
That is Strahd right there.
Yes. There you go. He's a later promo card.
Probably one of the legendaries, if I had to make a guess.
With second edition out, they say, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, baby, and follow the same game plan and release more revisions on the rules and expansions. So, Dan, have you ever played second edition? I've never played second edition.
A little bit, mostly off of CTRPGs, which are computer tabletop role-playing games, where things in D&D way back when were a lot more deadly. Like, you could die during character creation. It was hilarious. If you had like too low of an ability score in one thing, you just roll the die and you're just dead.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Have some of the dip on your way out.
But yeah, I've experimented with first, second edition, played third edition mostly through 3.5, which is the revised version of third edition. Mm-hmm. Then 4E, got my first experience with that from Craig, actually, whenever I played it with him and his group of friends. And then 5th edition came out and has been my favorite edition because it's the easiest to learn and to get new players in. It doesn't have some of the complexities that other editions have, but it's done really good expanding lore for Dungeons and Dragons. Like, there's been all kinds of supplementals written. Anybody can make something for D&D 5th edition. So,
all right, Dan, let's pump the brakes. We have to talk about the other editions first. D&D is basically an underground hit, like more than just role-playing game scene. They jump into video games, like Dan said. Specifically, I don't know if you've heard this, but 1998's Baldur's Gate.
Yes.
They also make card games like the one we're talking about now.
Sure.
So, smash cut it's Y2K, guys. We're all freaking out, thinking the world's going to end. And it did for 2nd edition. Wizards of the Coast said, hey, new year, new us. And 3rd edition's born. Unfortunately, the calculator was sold separately. Dan gets that joke because it is a severe number crunch.
Right.
In 2003, Wizards decides, let's try and organize the mess of numbers that we came up with version 3.5.
He's got visual aids
right here.
Yeah, there it is, yeah.
The fun fact about 3.5 and what Wizards of the Coast did, the boys over at Apple love this business model so much, they still use it for phones today. Because it's a half step. So, almost 10 years later, Wizard drops what I like to call Yin 4th edition and Yang Pathfinder. Because 4th edition wasn't very well received, but Pathfinder just reiterated on
clearly not very well received.
Yeah. 4th edition, they put out like, this is their big money grab. We're going to have models. We're going to have mats. We're going to everybody has spells now. So it was a mess. It was fun, but it was a mess. And then finally, we end our journey in 2014. The 5th edition and current edition is released with the help of shows like Community, Stranger Things, and podcasts like Critical Role. Dungeons & Dragons hits the mainstream and is only getting bigger. Personally, it's become like my favorite edition in the long, ever-changing story that is D&D. So that basically wraps up like a quick, brief summary of the history of D&D.
Dan, there was a little something across your face then when Craig said 5th edition was his favorite.
No. It's like I said, 5th edition is one of my favorites to play because I can make a character real quick. But I do like the number crunchiness of 3.5. But I also enjoy 3.5 because it had so many options for character creation. You'd be hard pressed to find a similar character. Like you can make like there's 10,000 different character options and stuff through feats and other stuff. That's why they kind of went to 5th edition, which was a simpler model. And I'm going to be honest, 4th edition, you know, The Incredibles, right? Syndrome, where he had that big monologue where, and when everybody has these powers, no one's special. That's kind of what 4th edition felt like, because everybody had these powers that overlapped on each other. And it was just like, whose turn is it?
Escalated to the point of ridiculousness.
It's like watching 2 blue control decks in Magic go against each other, and they all have 7 lands and a full hand. It's like, oh god,
there's a man who knows. There's a man who knows. That's brilliant. Thank you for that, gents. Mm-hmm. That's really the kind of thing that people come to I hope they come to the OP Kit retrospectives to get. Should we have a bit of a chat about a few of the cards then?
Yes.
That's what we came here for.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to kick off with the Drow Assassin, Minion Humanoid. There's that classification type thing I was talking about. So on his game text, he reads, once per turn, you may send one of your Drow Assassin dice to the use pile to deal 2 damage to one of your opponent's characters. He's a monster, he's evil, and you can equip him with stuff. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to my mind, that's clearly thematic. He's an assassin. He deals damage across to your opponent's characters. It's pretty spelt out there. But tell me a little bit more. I mean, what's a drow? Why are they assassins? You know,
the drow are a ruling authority in the Underdark. They are one of the many civilizations that live there. And the Underdark is what would be basically the flip side of the surface world, just in total darkness. Like everything developed to live in that under earth darkness society. Along with the drow, there's things like mind flayers, Draugr, which are dark dwarves, deep gnomes, dark gnomes, so on and so forth. The Drow actually came to go to the Underdark after something that was called the Crown Wars. And that's the same picture.
There's the image, yeah.
The Crown Wars, which was like this huge civil war between elves, started by the Sun Elves, which is a subrace of normal elves. They were, Drow were originally came out in 1977, but they weren't originally known as Drows. They were just known as Black Elves, which were used the same statistics as regular elves. And then later on, they got more notoriety in the Hall of the Fire Giant supplement that was added in Dungeons & Dragons First Edition.
It's always so grand. I love it.
Yeah. But they basically were shoved down into the Underdark through heavy magic and rituals, defeated. But instead of feeling that sense of defeat, they literally took over everything in the underside of everything, becoming the literal almost rulers of the Underdark. The reason why the Drow assassin is such an important thing is Drows are very well known for their abilities in creating poisons and other alchemic concoctions. They're stealthy. They have a high level of dark vision, which in Dungeons & Dragons is your ability to see in the dark. They can see twice as far as any normal creature that has dark vision. However, that does come with the idea that in sunlight, they kind of get blinded because their vision is so set to darkness. But yeah, they know how to make really powerful poisons. One good example of their poisons is Drow poison, which can put somebody to sleep. Like just one little touch of it puts people to sleep. Then they take them back for interrogation, turn them into slaves to work for their empire, so on and so forth. They can also like cover themselves in darkness through their magics, because Drows are also very high level magic users. It's just innate in their blood. They also have very unique equipment in where they forge weapons in the Underdark that are said to be more powerful than most surface realm weapons. However, if you take them in the sunlight, they disintegrate.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
Sure. So for the most part, they're basically bred to be assassins. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to find the perfect assassin class, a Drow is most certainly what class you would make if you were going to roll one.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And certainly earn their evil tag on the card by the sounds of it. Yeah.
Well, the Drow actually, after the Crown Wars or even during it, started worshiping evil gods. Mostly influenced by Loth the Spider Queen. I don't know if there's a card in that.
There is.
Yeah. Loth the Spider Queen, also known as the Demon Queen as well, who can turn from a spider with a drow face or a very exquisite-looking drow woman, which also plays into the fact that Drow society, women are in leadership positions because they are the most capable of drawing power from Loth. So it's all very interesting knit, but yeah, like Craig said, they are perfectly suited to being assassins due to their knowledge of poisons and their ability to work in the night like no other.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you for your insights there, Daniel. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take us on to the next card. Okay. I think on the kind of opposite side of the scale here, because now we have an elf wizard. She's a legendary harper. She has a game mechanic called experience, which in Dice Masters means that when they kill a monster, a card with a monster tag, they get a stat bump, +1/+1. And she also has a secondary game text that says when Elf Thief attacks, you may purchase an action die for 2 energy less than normal. An action die usually signify in the context of D&D, gear, spells, potions, these types of things. She's got the good symbol. She's equipable. And then, actually, I'll hold it up for you guys to see. she's got this little symbol there, which I think is Harper.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. This is the guild sign of the Harpers.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the game tech seems particularly appropriate to me. She's a wizard, and that connection to action cards, which in D&D are often spells and potions, seems a wizardy thing to do. But you mentioned before that there's different types of elves.
Mm-hmm.
So how does she differ?
Multiple different types.
Sure, not just any elf. I'm a sun elf.
Show me your picture again.
Sure.
Real quick. Come on, autofocus. You got this. She honestly looks like a high elf, you think, Craig?
Yeah, she looks more like a high elf, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's got kind of very ornamental outfit, white and gold, sort of jewelry and stuff. She's doing something with like a little magic stone in her hands.
Generally speaking, in D&D terms, high elves are more in tune with the magic compared to other ones. I'm going to mute my mic so you don't hear the little ones running back and down.
We don't mind. We don't mind.
Just like with Drow, elves themselves are also highly attuned to magic. High elves are just the epitome of that magical attunement. In Dungeons and Dragons, they get special bonuses that other elves don't. Like they can cast and learn a new spell that they carry on with them for the rest of their life. Elves themselves were created in the first edition of Dungeons and Dragons, whenever the whole kit caboodle started. They were a character class themselves. Instead of, like how it is right now, an elf wizard, it used to just be elf.
Sure.
And they were just really powerful magic casters. That later changed in second edition whenever you could become an elf fighter, an elf magic user, so on and so forth. One of the effects you read off, which was she could spend die or regain a die.
She gets them for cheaper. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just reiterate. She purchases action die for 2 energy less. So she gives a discount in the kind of cost mechanic of the game of Dice Masters. But action die is just an umbrella term that usually includes swords, helmets, spells, magical items, potions, and so on and so forth.
Well, in Dungeons and Dragons, wizards, at least in 5th edition, have an ability to recover magic whenever they rest. So I kind of feel like there's a correlation between that and that ability. So that's what made me kind of go like, curious.
Yeah.
So, anything else you want to know about elves? I have a plethora of knowledge.
I wouldn't even know where to start to ask. I suppose just give me a few other examples. You mentioned sun elves. Mm-hmm. We've got the drow. Just give me a couple of other examples of different types of elves.
Wooden wild
buckle up, buddy, because there's a bunch.
Wooden wild elves who live out in the forest and nature. Wild elves go into the deep nature, like ancient forests and stuff like that. There was an avian type of elf. Let me see if I can remember the name. The Avariel or winged elves. They were just basically flying elves who are basically extinct now because dragons hunted them down to almost extinction.
Kings of the skies.
Moon elves, worshippers of the moon, get their power from the moon, so on and so forth. Trying to think if there's any more that I can think of at the time.
Oh, would you consider a ladrin a certain type of elf?
Yes.
Or would you consider them the own thing?
There's always been kind of mixed on that. Like Eladrin were like considered progenitors, I think, of elves, or like an offshoot of elves. It's all very weird. I've never really been able to source out the lore myself.
Basically, what an Eladrin is they are an elf of a season. So you'd have a summoner Eladrin, a winter Eladrin type of deal, so on and so forth. But they have the same characteristics of an elf, but if they're their own race, it's kind of debatable.
Right.
Like,
Kind of makes sense.
Winter Legend, I'm sad.
Very good. Very good. Okay, well, in the interest of times, I'll wrap up the elf wizard, gents.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take us on to the dwarf cleric. So this guy, he's a legendary Order of the Gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a halo, which I think is another good kind of dude. He's equipable. He's got the experience gain text again, so loves beating up monsters. But his core gain text says, once per turn, while Dwarf Cleric is active, after you declare blockers, you may choose one of your blockers. Prevent all damage dealt to that blocker this turn. So, in the combat mechanic of Dice... in the combat mechanic of Dice Masters, you've got an attack stat and a defense stat.
Mm-hmm.
But once a character's blocked, they're always blocked, regardless of the outcome of the combat. So what this guy does is he kind of steps in and says, right, well, even though you're tougher, you can't hurt my mate, kind of thing.
So they have a high defensive capability themselves, like they can take a lot of hits or stop a lot of hits.
For his cost, so you can buy the character for 4. What was that again, Daniel? Craig?
It's a better picture.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, there it is. There's the guy. So they're stripping these pictures straight out of
5th edition, it seems like.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, they do somewhat defensive, balanced up with their purchase cost.
It seems to me like in 5th edition, clerics have certain spells that make it harder for you to hit their friends, such as Shield of Faith or what's another one?
Sanctuary,
yeah. That would be a way that in the game he could do something like that. So say I'm a cleric, Daniel is up front and personal, he's a fighter, and there's a big dragon in his face. If I cast Sanctuary on him, it forces the dragon to basically rethink whether or not he wants to attack him. Because if he wants to attack him, he has to make a save. If he fails it, he is not able to do it whatsoever. He just loses the round.
Right. Yeah. So very thematically connected to I suppose, the cleric element, not so much the dwarf element.
Well, dwarves just make natural clerics because they are such devoted entities. Like dwarves themselves are just devoted in their faith, in their family, and in their home. They make great fighters and clerics and barbarians, which are like these just buff characters in D&D. Like the elf, they came out in 1974 along with the first edition D&D. Also, just like the elf, were their own technical character class.
Yeah, okay.
Again, I don't know how that ended up coming to be like, okay, we got a human fighter, human wizard, dwarf, elf. What? The funniest thing, I think, is dwarves actually were based on Norse mythology and something else called Teutonic, which is a Germanic name. So whenever I think Lord of the Rings came out and you had Gimli, who spoke in that very thick kind of like Scottish accent and such, it put on that Scottish accent for many other players to come, because you walk into a game, somebody's playing a dwarf, they're going hard in the Scottish accent.
Well, I was about to say, so that may even be you. I've listened to a few of your episodes. There's definitely someone trying a bit of the old Scotch.
Yeah, that's this guy right here. I know better.
Yeah, dwarves just have a strong devotion, which makes them solid clerics. But dwarves also are hardy health-wise. They have a lot of what's known as constitution in Dungeons and Dragons, which gives them a lot of hit points to take more damage. They're also strong and wise, which is another thing that clerics use, is their wisdom to cast their magics. And they're also very strong against poison. So, like, if they were to fight a drow, say, drows would have a less effective time against them.
Sure.
Unfortunately, that's not on the card from what I can tell, is that they don't have that.
It is kind of present, though. So if the Drow deals 2 attack, but the Dwarf Cleric has a defense of 3, 4, or 5, depending on what level you bring him in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of there. It's just not as implicit.
Right.
Yeah, bro. Excellent. Okay, well, in the interest of time, I'm going to wrap that section up there.
All right.
That's the first 3 cards from the D&D set. Thank you, gents, for helping me out with that set. Daniel and Craig are going to stick with me and help me with the rest of the Battle for Faerun sets. But for now, come back for part 2. The very intelligent YouTube algorithm is going to have a couple of videos on the right-hand side of the screen that you should stick around and check out. Give us a thumbs up for Daniels and Craig coming on. Do you know what? Hearing myself, it's affecting my ability to talk.
It's driving you nuts, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I'm slightly faster than the,
Yeah.
Yep.
So let me try that again. The YouTube algorithm is going to The YouTube algorithm will give you a couple of suggested videos on the right-hand side of the screen. Give us a thumbs up for Daniel and Craig coming out and helping me out. And come back and check out part 2 soon.